When you think about American energy, a conversation cannot happen without mentioning Harold Hamm. Executive chairman of Continental Resources, one of the nation's largest independent oil companies, Harold recently released a book, Game Changer, Our 50-Year Mission to Secure America's Energy Independence, which focuses on the link between America's energy independence and national security. Harold, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Well, it's good to be here with you, Matt. Thank you.
So you've had a long and storied career. Why write a book now?
Well, somebody had to tell the story. With everything that's happened with horizontal drilling, we somebody had to tell that story. I didn't want to, but it came down to somebody had to do it, and perhaps I was best suited to tell that story. So anyway, I thought long and hard about it and decided, okay, I'd do it. So
Has that story not been properly told previously? Are there a lot of misconceptions?
it had not been told before. And there was a whole lot of misconceptions. There were some disparaging things about the industry and I don't think that anybody had told it from the very beginning holistically to where we are today. And so that had to be told about what really changed the world uh, with, uh, with oil and natural gas in America and the world.
Tell a little bit though of your story when you were just getting started and how this all came to be.
Well, first of all, I've had a long career in the industry, as you just mentioned, but my approach to the industry was actually initially from the oilfield service industry. So it involved all the services plus a long stint with drilling. But had at one time 26 drilling rigs, and so I wanted always to be an explorationist, and that's what I became. And the most of my success and a great deal of that success came from that activity, being an explorationist geologist in this business. So, but by being in the services, particularly horizontal with drilling, then it's only natural that I and a few others are the ones that basically made it possible to drill horizontally and brought this about. When we first started working with it, drilling highly deviated wells, primarily for stranded oil and gas reserves underneath cities. Uh, the city of Enid, for instance, we drilled 16 wells to the IMO gas cap underneath the city of Enid. So some of these were highly deviated. But it wasn't just Enid, it was Oklahoma City, it was Chickasha, other cities in Oklahoma and other places that went on. But what it did, it got us looking at what the type of production from some of these highly deviated wells with slant wells through the producing intervals. And later on, for instance, I drilled one well as an injection and withdrawal well in a gas field, a gas storage unit, and found out from a short interval, 2,000 feet, that you could withdraw or inject at about 5 times the rate that you could from a vertical well. So if you can imagine, if you've got a 14-foot zone, let's just say, and instead of going in and just drilling through that and completing within that 14-foot interval, if you could place a wellbore in it that went 2 miles, think about how that would increase production as that wellbore was exposed for 2 miles to that rock, to that same reservoir. So you're talking about 10 times or 20 times, you're talking about 100 times or 1,000 times the productivity of that interval. So that's really the magnitude of what I thought was possible from the beginning, and we proved it right pretty well. Our company was involved in drilling the first ever horizontal oil field in the world with strictly horizontal wells. It wouldn't produce vertically, but it would produce horizontally. And this was before wellbore stimulation in horizontal fields or horizontal intervals. So just with wellbore exposure. So you took something that wouldn't produce economically and yet put a horizontal wellbore in it. This is 9,000 foot deep. Put a horizontal wellbore in it, a mile long, and suddenly you had 900 barrels a day. So that's the type of results from that field. That's a 250 million barrel field, and Continental and one other company was the only companies ever drilled a well in it. So
Where did the narrative piece get off the track? You talk about writing this book to set the record straight. Where did the
yeah,
that
man,
element?
that's a good question. And what you have to do is look at the whole industry and the transformation of our entire industry, oil and gas, and what's happened and what other people saw as a possibility, particularly Russia. When they saw what we were doing with horizontal drilling, they thought, wow, this is going to be a great threat to our tremendous reserves of natural gas in this country. And we've got to try everything we can to shut it down. They spent $500 million in propaganda alone in this country. Can you imagine what they spent in Europe to scare the bejesus out of anybody that would want to allow horizontal drilling, or as they tabbed it quickly, put the F word to it, fracking. That just sounds kind of bad.
It sounds like a bad word, right?
Yeah, it's a bad word. You asked a bunch of school kids, would y'all support fracking? No. So yeah, they did a real job, and this was
They had an effective marketing strategy.
it was effective. This was back in the early '90s, and when they really spent all this time and effort and money here and in the U.S. and the industry was not doing well. You know, prices were low, had been from the '80s, into the '90s, and the industry wasn't doing very well, and we didn't fight back very well. First of all, didn't understand what was going on. They did this very discreetly, funneled the money in from offshore sources, banking sources, and very discreetly did this. But, you know, a lot of people didn't realize what was going on. We didn't either. It took a while before we figured it out. They spent also, can you imagine how much money they spent in Europe along those same lines? First of all, they thought this technology was going to go everywhere, and it should have, but there's a lot of state-owned countries that own the state lands by the government. And so it's not like here in the U.S. where you have fee ownership and people want you to come drill them well.
Take us then to today, and I want to ask you about the national security component in Link in a minute, but just give your assessment of where we are as a country and our approach to energy. If you were to give us a grade, what would it be and why?
Okay, let's back up from the beginning. And at that time when this began, everybody was thinking about peak oil. It had peaked out, it had already passed peak, and we were into a phase called terminal decline. It was going to be declining out till it ended, terminal, just produced out. And suddenly, though, what's happened since then with horizontal drilling, and as this, first of all, went from no people doing it, none, we were just on a cutting, bleeding edge, to no people doing it, to 95% of all the wells drilled in the U.S. is horizontal, only 5% vertical. That's the stats today. And what's happened, we've basically tripled, went from a little less than 5 million barrels a day of crude oil to about 13 today, and quadrupled the amount of natural gas. So it's been tremendous And then now we're doing it with about 650 rigs. In 1981, it's 4,500. So, it's been amazing what we've been able to accomplish with horizontal drilling. And so, anyway, that's it. So you have to set that stage first to get to where we're at today. I began telling people in 2010 that we will become energy independent. Nobody believed it. Very few people believed it. Are we energy independent? Sure. We became energy independent in 2019. On a BTU basis today, we're energy independent.
I just want to take a step back because the productivity is enormous. You're saying, let me make sure I get these numbers right. 650 drills versus over 4,800, right? And so enormous productivity, enormous growth, and it's the sheer volume of extraction that people are against. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think the volume of extraction. I think this very small footprint. Drilling a lot of these from one 5-acre pad, as many as 20 wells, 16 to 20 wells from the 5-acre pad. So the footprint's very small. So ecologically, it's great. This is light, sweet crude oil. We've, taken emissions with clean burning natural gas down almost 40% here in America, back to the early 1970s level. All the things that you can think about it is good. Getting back to the disparagers, there was other type of disparagers besides Europe. We had people that wanted market share from us. So wind and solar, they didn't do us any favors. So they disparaged us every way they could. So there's been a lot of things that went on to make the narrative bad against us. So will this book set the record straight and change that narrative in a big way? I think so.
And you link a lot of it to national security. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's been great what's happened just the last couple of years. If you look at Russian invasion of Ukraine and where Europe would have been this past year without the LNG that we shipped to them, they would have been very cold. And some of them were very cold. Without much of a winter last winter. They were blessed with not much of a winter. I was talking to one friend of mine at Cheniere, and they ship LNG. And he told me that they shipped about 630 shipments. One shipment will heat 1 million homes for a month. One. They only had about 10% of the market. They shipped 630 tankers. So you have to think about that, the magnitude of it and what we're able to do, not only just here in the U.S., lower emissions, but around the world. And so you think about that magnitude and how great that is. And with horizontal drilling, being able to develop the tight rock, as we call it, low porosity, low perm shales, that's the source beds themselves, Matt. That's where this oil and gas was sourced. So for 150 years, we've been living off the 15% that leaked off those source beds naturally through fractures that leaked off those source beds. 150 years. Okay, now we can tap into the 85% that's left in those source beds. So you think about the magnitude of what's here. And some people say, well, we found a 100-year supply of natural gas. I think it's more than that. As a geologist, I think it's 200 years of supply of clean burning natural gas here in the U.S. So it's tremendous what to look forward. So when you think about the name Game Changer, and what it means for national security. It means that the U.S. doesn't have to beg from Saudi Arabia to give us more fuel, more oil. We don't have to. Europe doesn't have to beg for more gas from Russia. You know, this can be furnished from the U.S. to our allies and to for our own use from right here in the U.S. So we're not dependent on someone else. You know, the reason that Russia weaponized, you know, their natural gas to Europe was they wanted them to follow their will. I mean, that's the only purpose, right? Okay, you boys treat us good or cut your gas off. So, you know, the powers there decided they know that NATO, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to follow Russia's will, and so they cut your gas off. But anyway, it's a great story. It's a fantastic story about how this has happened. It's a fantastic thing that's happened, that's come about. So nobody had told the holistic view of how this came about from beginning to end. Were people that knew how to drill and how to do this from a technical side when nobody else did. We didn't have tools to do it. You know, you had to understand, you know, how to kick it off and how to go down, turn right, turn left, and put the drill bit where you want it in the reservoir that you want it in, not some other place, and to drill long laterals underground.
So, last question. I just want to get your broader take on this. You've been in business for years. You've been pretty active in being involved in supporting politics and being engaged in different ways. Obviously, energy policy has a huge impact on what you do. How are you feeling about the country? Are you optimistic about the future?
You know, I think we've got a lot of tremendous problems in our country today. I'd like to say, yes, I love our country. I'm a patriot. You know, I lost a brother, you know, in armed services. You know, I love our country. But where it's going and what's going on, right now, today, if the president wants more oil, who's he call? Does he call any producer? Does he call Harold Hamm in Oklahoma City? Or does he go down and call Maduro in Venezuela? Or does he call MBS in Saudi Arabia? You know, that is a tremendous, tremendous problem, issue. It's hard to believe some of these things, right? And I think that then all the push to electric vehicles. Okay, we just become energy independent where we don't have to depend on the Saudis or somebody else call the shots and feed them. Just become energy independent. Okay, we're going to go with electric vehicles now. Push it 100% electric vehicles, right? That's what the government wants you to do. Park your car and go 100% electric vehicle. And guess where all the precious metals come from that build those batteries? 85% from China. Do they love us? They care about us? They want to dominate the U.S.? Absolutely. Are they well on their way to doing that? Pretty much. So do I worry about where we're headed and how we're going to get there? Sure. It bothers me. I've been around too long, I guess. But anyway, it's troubling.
Well, Harold Hamm, thank you so much for being here, and it's a great conversation. The book is Game Changer: Our 50-Year Mission to Secure America's Energy Independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.